Welcome everyone to the webinar, Flat Organizations, Do They Help or Hinder Performance? The question that I would have to help focus our discussion today is whether a flatter organization is better for my business. And I use business in the broad term, but it could be a not-for-profit organization or it could be a different type of an organization. But the question is flatter better? And what I would like to do is work through a few things with you today. So the outline for my talk today is to start with why do people pursue flatter organizations? So what's the rationale? What is people's thinking about why they would want to have a flatter organization? And then the second, which is the heart of the presentation, are what are the principles that we need to know when doing organization design work? Because a flatter organization means fewer layers in the organization, and one is not able to really think about doing that unless you're thinking about the overall organization design. So that comes right to the heart of the matter. Just to let you know, this is not purely an organization design presentation. I do have another one of those in 1 month where I'll focus in on organization design principles, but I really want to talk about it today from the focus of flat organizations. And at the end, I'll have some summary and some closing comments. So I've come up with 6 points as to why I think people would pursue flatter organizations. So I've got 3 on this page and 3 on the next page. So the first one is increased engagement. So there'd be a feeling in the organization that if it's flatter, so you have fewer levels of management, that employees are more emotionally connected because they can see the top of the organization more clearly, and the fewer layers of management means less translation, if you will, of the vision, the mission, and the strategy of the organization. The second, and this one is high on most people's lists and maybe even number 1 on most lists in terms of flatter, is that there would be less costs. So the organizations are able to spend less on human resources because there are fewer layers of management and therefore fewer staff members. And that would be a rationale for a CEO who might want to cut back in terms of expenses in the organization to maximize profit and therefore say, well, we don't need that layer of management. Let's eliminate it. The third one is around building trust. So this is a feeling that there's more of an autonomous environment. So people are more in control of their own actions. People are able to do more on their own because there's less management in the organization. So kind of the ratio of managers to employees is less. So therefore employees are more autonomous. The fourth one is increased confidence. So it's similar to the autonomous one, but it's more along the lines of employees feeling empowered, that they're able to manage themselves more and therefore be able to make better decisions and faster decisions and be more confident in the work that they're able to do within their own authority. The fifth one is improved communication. Fewer layers allow for a clearer chain of communication. It's kind of like the children's whispering game. If I whisper something at the top of the organization, if it goes through fewer layers in the organization, then the message is more likely to be consistent by the time it gets to the bottom. And then finally, collaboration, that employees feel they have an equal voice in the operation and the way in which the organization works. So these are true insofar as they go, and I think these are all valid objectives in any organization that we should want to do that. And in fact, in many organizations, there are too many layers. So the issue is, how does one think about taking out layers in an organization in a way that is actually going to help an organization achieve these objectives as opposed to not achieving them. So flat organization has unfortunately come to be kind of in the parlance of manager speak, if you will, a quick cure for reducing expenses and a way of achieving these aims in a quick way. But before we go too far down that road, I really do want to express this large caution flag around the concept of flattened organizations. In our society, unfortunately, the pendulum swings. So we go from too big to too small. We go from too much of something to too little of something. So in terms of reacting and applying a formula for change, very often we overreact and try to use what can be quite a complex solution in a simplified way, and therefore end up not achieving the results that we hope to achieve, but in fact might be working counter to that. So so if all of those points that I've read to you just now sound good, then that's a good thing, because those are good things. But we really do need to raise the caution flag around how we go about doing it. You may have seen on my website, and I think I put this up on Twitter as well, that taking layers out of an organization is like pruning a tree. So if I'm a gardener and I've got a tree and it's larger than I would like it to be, and it's casting more shade than I would like to, it's easy for me as an amateur gardener to say, well, I'm going to take off a bunch of branches and open it up. But if I don't know what I'm doing, it is easy to kill the tree, because I may take out the wrong branch, too many branches, branches in the wrong place. And it's exactly the same thing for organizations. If I'm not aware of the principles that are involved in organization design, it's easy to take out the wrong layers or to take out too many layers, and the result is that those lofty goals, those aspirational goals, which are helpful and meaningful, might actually not be achieved, or we might actually go in the wrong direction. And the reason for this is that most organizations do grow organically over time. And as a result of that, an occasional pruning is in order, and unnecessary layers of management, because unnecessary layers of management can creep into the organization. Sorry, I fumbled there a little bit because I'm thinking of an example. Think of a vice president of operations for an organization. The organization has been growing, and the vice president has had director positions. Under the directors are the frontline managers. Now, as operations increase, the amount of work increases, so the number of crews increase, so the number of frontline managers increase. So it's quite possible, and I've seen this happen over and over in organizations, the director will come to the vice president and say, you know, I've got too many direct reports now. I love my job, but I feel that I'm not able to focus in on some of my value-added work, so can I hire an assistant, and that assistant can take some of the work off of my desk, and I'll be able to devote more time to the crews. And you know, on the face of it, this sounds like a really logical solution to the problem, and the VP is likely to say, sure, go ahead and hire that, and this is a way of being able to move forward. In that situation, what often happens over time is that there's not an awareness of the nature of the work that should be delegated to that assistant. So this assistant director starts getting managerial duties and authorities delegated to them. So over time, the director might have, I don't know, 7 or 8 frontline managers reporting to them, and some of the perhaps professionals, and the assistant director has a number of people reporting to him or her as well. So what's happened now? We've got an extra layer in the organization, because where you had frontline managers managed by directors, now you've got some frontline managers managed by an assistant director and others managed by a director. So in organization design speak, I would call that a redundant role. So that's a layer of management that's not appropriate, and it creates issues in the organization. So the answer that the vice president should have had, if the VP was aware of organization design principles, was to think about actually creating another director position, splitting up the functions, creating some specialization, and perhaps being able to do more work better. So the main point I want to make here, though, is giving you the example of how this grows organically. It's not going to grow in a consistent way across the whole organization. So these managerial layers are going to be put in place over time as individual decisions are made. So some parts of your organization may end up with too many layers. Other parts of your organization may, in fact, not have enough layers. So downsizing isn't the issue, right sizing is the issue. How do I identify those positions which are what I would call redundant, those positions where you don't really need that extra layer of management, and how do I perhaps even add positions in other parts of the organizations where I'm under-resourced. So the organization design needs to be the right for the size and complexity of the organization. In other words, what its strategy is, how we move forward, and it needs to be at the right size and complexity for the nature of the work that it does. So this means that it has the right number of layers, the correct number of layers for the work that needs to take place, and it has the correct alignment of functions in the organization. So I bring you to this slide now, slide number 12 on the screen. Complexity of work in the organization. If you think about work in the organization, as intuitively we all understand this, the higher in the organization the position, the more complex the work. So if I'm a worker and I'm come into the organization in the morning, so I come to work in the morning, I'm assigned my work, I do my work all day long, I successfully complete the tasks that have been delegated to me, and then I go home at the end of the day. So most of my work is really on a day-to-day basis. There might be some situations where perhaps I'm a more senior worker and I'm given a task list over a month or 2 months to have to make sure certain things happen in a certain period of time. But the maximum would tend to be, 3 months out. So my accountability is relatively short in terms of complexity and the nature of work that I have to complete over time. If I'm a vice president, I might be delegated work that is going out 2, 3, or 4 years. If I'm a VP of sales, I might be asked to open up a market on another continent and say, in 3 years, we want to have a full sales function on this continent so that we can reach out to people in their languages, have people on the ground that are actually selling our product closer to it. So for me to be able to do that work, I need to put a number of different things in play over time. And perhaps delegate some of it to my directors, delegate some of it further down the organization so that 3 years from now I can successfully achieve that objective. So it's important not to think of this just intuitively, but to think in real concrete terms about how complex is this work. So the example I gave you earlier where the director is hiring an assistant director and then delegating managerial accountability and authority, you find that you have 2 managerial positions in this director role, each reporting to the other, and that creates this overlap in terms of accountability and authority, so the complexity of work is not there. The other point I would like to make on this slide is that it really is all about the work. When you're thinking about organization design, you can't start by thinking about the people, because people will have their capability, they will have their skills and so on, and you want to absolutely make sure that people are in the right position at the right time. But in terms of setting up that work, you want to make sure that you understand the roles and the complexity of work that is necessary within that role, so that you can get the roles aligned first, and then you think about how do I align people to that work. So the work at each level then, as a summary of that previous slide, the work at each level of a properly designed organization is different. So it's different in the nature of the complexity of the work. And here's a key takeaway. I'm going to come back to this point a little later. The capability to do the work is also different. So my capability, and I call this problem-solving capability. I've got articles on this on my website if you're interested. My problem-solving capability is going to determine whether I'm suitable for doing work at the front line, whether I'm suitable for doing work as a frontline manager or a professional, as a director or as a vice president. So certainly people can mature in their problem-solving capability. So over time, as they mature and they get promotions, they can move up the organization. But one wouldn't take normally, I don't think I've ever seen this actually, one wouldn't take a frontline worker and say, gosh, you're great, you're going to be a vice president starting tomorrow. maybe in the movies it happens sometimes, but I've never seen it happen in a real organization. So the trick then is, having started with the work and understanding the complexity of work, that gives you the insight into the nature of the capability of the individual to be successful at that work, and then you can start assigning people into positions. The key issue here is that capability can't be trained. Capability is a maturation process in terms of being able to work at certain levels of complexity in the organization. I have an article in terms of the fundamental requirements for placement into a position, and problem-solving capability is one of them. The other two are skills and knowledge and application, their desire to be successful at the work. So you can train, motivate, coach in the other two areas, but in this one you can't. So this is coming back to the second slide where I said I would, is so that getting the right people with the right capability, and by that I mean problem-solving capability, the right skills and knowledge, and the right application into the right positions becomes the key. So starting with the organization design, getting the roles right, then doing the talent pool in terms of matching people to positions. So, self-managed teams. This is something that you read about a lot. You read about individuals, you read about organizations that have implemented self-managed teams. In all of my observations, and from everything I know about organization design and success in organizations, self-managed teams don't work. They just absolutely do not work. If the organization doesn't name a leader, what happens is a leader will emerge. So if you take as an example an organization with let's just take a production facility. So you have 8 teams of 25 individuals each. So each one of them is a frontline manager for a production facility. Each one of those 8 has an average of 25 employees. That's a lot to manage, but it is possible to effectively manage those many frontline employees if you're co-located with them. And it's decided that you're going to remove, and I'm making an extreme example here, but it's decided that you're going to remove the frontline managers because the director knows all of this work and knows all of the workers, so should be able to do the work. So all of a sudden you have a director with 8 times 25, 200 direct reports. So of course it's going to be impossible to manage those. So leaders will emerge among those individual teams that will do their best to ensure that the work is done, and will be those that will coach, help with problem solving, and so on. No matter which layer in the organization where that managerial position has been taken out, if it's a value add position, in other words, if it's not redundant, there is value added work that manager brings in terms of problem solving capability. So here in this situation, by removing the manager, you have someone at the same level of capability emerging to assume those leadership roles, and that'll help, and they'll do the coaching and so on. But that value add that the first frontline manager can bring in terms of, I'm getting ahead of myself into organization design a couple of webinars down the road, but in terms of their diagnostic capability to do work is going to be missing. So as a result, over time, quality will go down. So the question I leave this slide on is, do you really want to leave this critically important decision in terms of a managerial leadership position for a team to chance, and probably in a situation where the person doesn't have the problem-solving capability necessary for the work? So if you think about complexity and capability, then as there is increasing complexity of work moving up the organization, there's an increasing capability of managers that is required in terms of problem-solving capability. And I put in parentheses here, but it's a very important parenthetical comment, that these managers have the right skills and knowledge, and that they will apply themselves to the work. So in terms of the summary on that aspect of the webinar, having too many layers is not good for an organization, because as you have too many layers, you get these redundant positions that I mentioned to you. So as you move up the organization, it's very important that at each layer of the organization you have an individual that's exactly one layer above. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go slide back to this previous slide just to make that point a little bit more clearly. So in terms of thinking about these director positions that I have on this slide, they require on those vice president positions for a number of things. So if I'm the CEO of the organization, I'm accountable for implementing the strategy of the organization. In implementing that strategy, I have value-added work that I need to do. So I am accountable to the board for doing some things. Those things might be 5 years out. It's a 5-year strategic plan, so I have some things that I need to deliver in 5 years. Now, as the CEO, I am not going to be able to do that work on my own. Okay, so you can't have an organization of one and be successful in this situation. So the CEO needs to sit down with the vice presidents and needs to think about what is the work that each of those vice presidents needs to do for them to make deliverables, say in 2, 3, or 4 years, so that I can successfully achieve my 5-year plan. Now that takes problem-solving capability of the CEO to be able to think out and problem solve and anticipate 5 years down the road what needs to happen so that I can get to those 5 years down the road in a successful way. And then here's my most technical term of the day. You need to chunk out that work to the VPs and translate it in a way that makes sense for the VP. So what does the VP of operations need to do? What does the VP of corporate services need to do? What does the VP of marketing and sales need to do, so that each of them delivering is going to help me achieve that strategy over that period of time. The VPs then in turn need to figure out what is their value-added work. So if I'm going to do this in 3 years so that the CEO can achieve the strategy in 5 years, what must I do, and what can I delegate down to the director level so that the directors would have accountability, maybe delivering something in 12 or 18 months, so that all of my directors in concert will help me achieve my objectives over the next 1 to 2 years, or 2 or 3 years. I'm sorry, I'm losing my examples here, so that the CEO can achieve his or her deliverables in 5 years. The point I want to make here is that by having this very value-added layering delegation system in place, you require the problem-solving capability at each level to be able to understand the work that they need to do within that time frame, and to have the value add to break it up, chunk it up, as I said earlier, and delegate it down in the right way. So if one of those VP positions is missing, they're not going to have the right skills, knowledge, context as directors to be able to do the work that they need to do. And the CEO, sadly, is not going to be pulling himself down into that VP level to think like a VP, to delegate in terms and timeframes that make sense to the directors. So each role in the organization is critically important in terms of doing their own value-added work within the time horizon of that position, but also translating that work and delegating down the organization, helping to problem solve, clearing the way, doing all of the things that they need to do that I talk about in the 5 requirements of effective managers. So I wanted to come back to this slide to really re-emphasize that point, because on the one hand, if you have too many layers in the organization, that's not good, because managers are stepping on each other and trying to do the same thing. So it's a redundancy of work, but having too few layers is also not good for your organization, because then you end up with work that should be done in a particular layer of the organization that is not getting done. And because that capability is unique for each layer of the organization, if you take out that position inadvertently or by accident and you don't have that work taking place, nobody else is going to do that work, because the directors won't have the capability to come up and do job for a missing VP, doing the right level of work for a missing VP position, and the CEO is fully engaged doing the work that they need to do at their level, and is not going to be pulling him or herself down to do the work that should happen at that VP level. So it's really important for us to start thinking about what about the complexity of work in the organization, and then with the right number of layers, assigning people with the right capability into the jobs. Because every position, and I really emphasize this last position in this last sentence in the third bullet, every position requires a manager that is exactly one level above, for all of these reasons that I just walked through with you. So that's the summary. I've got just 2 or 3 closing slides. I have a couple of questions that have come up, and it looks like I will have time to address those. Oh, I've got 4 minutes, maybe not that much time. So the Effective Manager Survey. I wanted to come back to this because in terms of thinking about layering of your organization, it's really important to understand the status of your managerial workforce. Our research shows that managers are only spending 55% of their time on value-added work. So value-added work is this work that I'm talking about in terms of using their full problem-solving capability for deliverables in the organization, but it's also in terms of their managerial work, chunking that work down, delegating it down, coaching, problem solving, and so on in terms of their subordinate managers. So the Effective Manager Survey is a tool that can be used by CEOs and heads of HR to really understand what is the state of managerial effectiveness within their organization, and then what are the key factors that are either supporting or getting in the way of managers being as effective as they can in the organization. So I'd be very happy to talk with anyone that might like more information about the Effective Manager Survey. I put this slide in because it's kind of a fun quote that I have from Albert Einstein. Make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. I think that's just good advice for life. There's a tendency in life for us to try to create systems and processes that are too simple. In other words, there's not enough complexity. Performance management is a wonderful example of that, where in organizations we'll try to set up checkmark systems for performance management when you really need to rely on the judgment of managers to make managerial decisions in terms of providing feedback. So everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler than is possible or wise, in fact. And exactly the same thing applies to flat organizations. So organizations should be made as flat as possible. In other words, you don't want extra layers, but not flatter. In terms of upcoming webinars, next 2 weeks from today, I will be doing how to get the most out of performance management meetings. So I just gave a really quick example of what some of that conversation might look like. On the PDF, this should be a hot link for you to get onto my website to register for these webinars. And the second webinar out, which would be 4 weeks from today, is organization design. Is it an art or a science? So I think you can get a bit of a sense from what I've talked about so far today that it is in fact a science. Although in terms of functional alignment, there is some art to it as well. But we will get into that in detail at that next meeting. I wanted to announce that I recently published a book, The Effective CEO, The Balancing Act That Drives Sustainable Performance. It is available as an EPUB. I've been very sure to make sure that it's not it's not DRM protected, so it'll work on any device. If you are a Kindle person and buy your books through Amazon, it is also available on Amazon.com and each of the country Amazons as well. On my website, I am offering as an introductory offer the EPUB for 99 cents for this week only. So that offer expires March 1st. So if you're interested in that, go ahead. This would be of interest to CEOs, certainly, particularly CEOs of smaller startup organizations. It would also be of interest to senior managers or executives with larger departments where they need to think in a systems way about how they manage all of their subordinates. And of course, it's of interest to heads of HR because they are one of the key advisors to CEOs for their work, and not to mention aspiring CEOs. So if you desire to be a CEO, this would be great reading for you. So the closing slide then, and that does bring us to our 30-minute mark, is to first of all thank you for your participation, to let you know that by signing on to effectivemanagers.com, you can register for my monthly newsletter. You can also get access to a lot of additional information. The one I have on the screen here is the Thinking Flat Organizational Structure, which we've just talked about today. Feel free to follow me on Twitter for daily management tips, and LinkedIn. I would love to contact with any of you through LinkedIn as well. So that brings me to the formal end of the webinar. We are 30 minutes in, and I do thank you. I have 2 questions on the screen. If anybody else has another question, feel free to type it in. So if I know many of you have to leave because I know this was a 30-minute webinar, but I will answer these questions, and they will be on the recording. So if you have to leave now and you're interested, there's one about matrix organizations and there's one about startup organizations. So the question is about matrix organizations and the role of matrix in this. The short answer for me for matrix is that it's a cop-out for managers to try to avoid, to try to organize on a matrix. The intent of matrix is good. It's trying to create a linkage between the operations link, so my managerial hierarchy above me in the organization and functions in the other part of the organization. So for example, I might be the head of HR for a manufacturing plant in the United States. And it's a European-based company, so there's a head office with a head of HR in the corporate office. So I would be accountable to the manager in the plant for providing my HR services there. So I'm providing services, and that is my boss. But I'm also accountable to the head of HR at the corporate office because the organization wants to have the same HR systems, the same payroll, the same benefits, the same processes, and so on. So this puts the HR person in the plant in a very difficult situation because for all intents and purposes, they have 2 bosses. They have a boss who's giving them and assigning them work in the plant, and they have a boss who is giving them and assigning them work from the head office. And that puts the individual that's in the plant, the head of HR in the plant, in the situation of having to set priorities and make trade-offs between those 2 positions. And that's just not the right way to do this work, because the organization should have systems in place where the decisions are made in a thoughtful way and priorities are set in a thoughtful way. So in the design that I'm talking about, and I will be addressing this in the webinar in 2 weeks, what you need to do is have very clear managerial accountability and authority. So I only have one boss, but I may have some cross-functional accountability and authority where I would have different types of authority with respect to my functional boss. So the main boss could be the head of HR in Europe, or it could be the plant manager, but you need to figure out which one is the real one so that the manager's not making the trade-offs. The manager's not stuck in the position of trying to make the trade-offs. The second question was asking what about startup organizations and entrepreneurial organizations, and I think that's an excellent question. In smaller organizations, and particularly startup organizations, as you're in a growth phase, it is often difficult to get all of the layers in place at the right time. Because you might be in a situation where you should have, for example, a VP of operations, but you don't really have enough work for a VP of operations now because you only have 2 plants. In 5 years you're going to have 4 plants or 6 plants, and you'll need a VP to coordinate all of that, but right now you don't have the ability to do it. So there are often situations in startup organizations and smaller organizations where you say, I really need a position in that layer. I really should have it, but we can't afford it because there's not enough work. So as in this example, the CEO would have to, quotation marks, act as the VP of operations to manage those directors of the plants. The advantage, though, about understanding the principles of organization design is you know that there are going to be symptoms as a result of the CEO trying to manage all of those plants directly or wherever that gap might be in the organization. And that's one of the messages that I will get into in some detail in the organization design webinar in 4 weeks. So thank you for that. No more questions have come up. I do appreciate your kind attention, and I see almost everyone stayed around for these two answers. So thank you for that. At the end of the webinar, there will be a very short a questionnaire will pop up asking you 3 questions. If you could give me 2 minutes to answer those in terms of your feedback on this webinar, it's very helpful to help me improve. And if there are any additional questions you have, you can just put it in one of those text boxes or send me an email. You've got my email address on the website, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you might have on any of this content. So thank you again for your time. Have a great rest of the day, and manage effectively today. Bye.
Hi, I'm Dwight Mahalitz, President of Effective Managers. Thank you so much for downloading the webinar. I hope that you enjoyed it and will find it useful. Feel free to check out other parts of the website for interesting downloads. Most are free, some are at a nominal charge, but I'm sure you'll find lots of interesting tools there and things that can help you be more effective. And in fact, that's what my job is. My job is to help you, help your organization be higher performing. The bottom line is that I want to start where you are, understand your problem, and provide services that can help you solve that problem and implement a solution as quickly and as effectively and as efficiently as possible. Give me a call, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you, talk about your situation, and see if there's anything that we can do together. Thank you.